Spring Equinox. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to a Spring Equinox special recording edition of Becoming Chiron, the key to unlocking healing and personal alchemy. With me, your hostess, Ursula Duffy. Today is Monday, March 20th, and I hit record right around 4:54 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time here in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And my goal was to get this podcast episode recorded and posted between the actual moment of the equinox and the moment of tomorrow's new moon. So I'm on target for that, which I'm very happy about. And I am just so excited to talk about the astrology of this week. And then we'll get into the Chiron content afterwards. Today, we'll be talking about Chiron in the 7th house. So to start with the Astro Weather Check, today is the beginning of a super, super potent and exciting and powerful week astrologically of giant shifts and incredible potential. So in about, half hour, we will have the Spring Equinox, which is also the sun's shift into the sign of Aries. So that will be at 5:24 p.m. So like I said, roughly a half hour from now when I hit the record button. And that moment alone is extremely powerful. It is an astrological new year. It's when the sun shifts out of the sign of Pisces, which is the end of the zodiac, to the sign of Aries, which is the very beginning. Now, this 0 degrees of Aries point, also called the Aries Point, which is the beginning of spring, Aries season, is getting a lot of attention over the next 24, 48 hours because the new moon tomorrow will also be at the same degree. So it's very interesting that this is happening this week, in particular with all the shifts that we have on the horizon in the moments that we're speaking now and throughout the rest of the week to come. So like I said, we have the equinox, the sun's ingress into the sign of Aries at 5:24 p.m. today. And then tomorrow we have the first new moon of the astrological new year, the new moon in Aries, which will be at 1:22, 1:23 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And I'm just looking at the charts for all of the happenings, and it's just so powerful. This time of the year, I find the energy to be extremely powerful. Anyway, that Aries energy to me is extremely potent. It can feel pretty chaotic at times as well because there's just so much life force in the northern hemisphere here, in our surroundings with the land and the water and the animals and the trees and earth and just all inside of us as well. Of this just life force, Aries energy to me is just so primal. It's all about survival and instinct and our individuation to a very big extent, which I'll touch on momentarily. But we also have at this moment right now, right before the sun's ingress into Aries, we have Mercury in Aries. Chiron and Jupiter are still hanging out together in Aries. So we'll have the sun shift very soon. So that'll be 4 placements in the sign of Aries. That is a lot of Aries energy. We just had, it's also quite a shift from the energy of last week. Last week, I talked about this last podcast episode. We had pretty much lots and lots of just confusing, watery, tense energy with all of the planets in Pisces, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Neptune, all squaring the planet Mars. And I talked about this last time. It's just been very hard to get motivated or carry out anything creatively. I think I called it last week in discussions about it with a friend, the spark that never really grows into a fire. And that's how it's felt. So that is shifting big time this week. You've probably already felt that energy shifting, and it's just way less confusing and kind of hard to put your finger on, like what is really what's the problem? Like the world stage is going kind of crazy again right now. So just know that this creative force and this life force energy is coming back into focus now. And we're going to leave that Piscean watery, confusing element with all the shifts that'll be happening concurrently and also consecutively as the week goes on. So I want to talk about the Aries point because I just feel like with the new moon happening so close to the equinox, there's just so much potential. And one of the things that I love to do when talking about degrees of the zodiac, as we've done in several episodes at this point, is go through the channeled imagery. So what I'm going to do is I'll touch on the symbols and the descriptions for the first degree of the zodiac, 0 Aries. In these symbol sets, we round up because there's also 30 seconds after the degree. So 0 degrees of Aries will be 1 degree of Aries for all these symbol sets. So I'll start with the Sabian symbol, which is very curious. And the Sabian symbol, which is just one set of channeled imagery for 1 degree of Aries, is a woman rises out of the water, a seal embraces her. So there's that. And then we have this book that I read from frequently, The Circular Temple by John Sandbach. And he has in here all the other sets. I don't know if it's comprehensive, but there's several of them. So he has the Omega set, the Pleiadian set, the Chandra symbols, and the Azoth symbols. So I want to touch on a lot of the supporting information that's also in this section. So the degree angel is also listed in here, and there's a title for it and everything. So I'll just go through piece by piece. The degree angel for 1 degree of Aries is Vahuya. And this angel represents time travel, will, and new beginnings, and manifesting / experimental energies. And the title is Relentless Quest or Redefinition of Territory. The Omega symbol, a treasure map tattooed on someone's back. And the description for that, strong instincts guide you to wherever you need to go. You're at your best when you follow your impulses and don't worry about trying to figure things out or justifying yourself. You need to keep disengaging from involvements that slow you down so that you may be free to follow your own unique path. You've got the map. Now all you have to do is look in the mirror to see it. The Pleiadian symbol, a mermaid and an octopus lovingly embracing. And the description, you love and accept whatever you encounter in the depths of your subconscious. You experience an emotional rapport at a deep soul level with those beings who superficially may appear different from yourself. Of course, it is natural that in this first degree of Aries, we encounter these denizens of the sea, for we are still so close to the preceding sign of Pisces, a water sign, and have brought with us these beautiful creatures to accompany us on the long journey forward. You're a love of the depths and darkness, and all of the beings dwelling there, and being friends of theirs have intuitive access to the many manifestations of their wisdom. The Chandra symbol, a man repairing and extending a stone wall in the spring. And the description for that. The Omega symbol of this degree is about a place where a treasure is located. The Chandra is all about the creating of a place by building a wall around it, which is a means of defining that place and maybe enlarging it. The stone wall is being extended. It is the self, which is the treasure, and the way to the self is embedded in the self itself. The map is tattooed on the back. You seek and define yourself by determining, expanding, and repairing your boundaries. Such a heavy, ponderous image as a man building a wall may seem strange as the very beginning of Aries, which is such a fast, fiery, immediate sign. But it is just this confrontation with the material world as symbolized by the stones used to build the wall that is needed for the newborn self to affirm a place in which to be and to grow and to discover its inner treasures. And by quote unquote newborn self, I mean all of ourselves at every moment, as we are all constantly being reborn. And the Azoth symbol, colored sheet lightning flickering in the depths of an opal. You intuitively sense all the vast potentials lurking within the limits of the physical realm. Your perception is rich, quick, and fleeting. You bring a vividness and aliveness to whatever you do that can infuse everything around you with fresh, vibrant energy. So, sit with all of that. Tap into what resonates, especially right now in this moment as we're in this very liminal space, saddling the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aries. And I see the one thing in all of those symbols is a very interesting depiction and characterization of this liminal space. From the depths of Pisces and taking all that wisdom that's been built to get to the end of the zodiac and then starting fresh and new again, and how that's a metaphor for every moment and how we truly become who we truly are. And I've been kind of playing around with how to describe or come up with words for what we're all going through and these shifts that are taking place this week in particular. After everything that's already shifted, we had, Saturn already changed signs. I talked about that last time. And the one thing that keeps coming to me as like a catchphrase or a way to describe it is the transformative power of individuation. And a lot of Carl Jung's work is focused on this. And one of my favorite quotes by him is, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And I feel like everything that I've mentioned so far and read and talked about really captures and encapsulates the energy of these moments, and this week in particular, and should be a reminder to us all that on a soul level, what we came here to do is to be ourselves and to be our most authentic and truest self. And that's very much in alignment with Aries energy as well. So if you do any new moon practices, if you do any new moon intention setting or ceremony, this is a very powerful time to reflect on everything that's happened since the full moon earlier this month, since the new moon in Pisces, and infuse your words, intentions, whatever, with the potency of affirming and becoming and being at all times your truest self. So that is the new moon. That's tomorrow, like I said, around 1:22, 1:23 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then on Thursday at 8:14 a.m., Pluto will dip its toe into the sign of Aquarius, which is the first time that anybody on this planet that's alive right now will experience this. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was in 1777. This is huge. And this is where I'm pulling in that transformation part. Pluto is the planet of transformation and purification and rebirth through life and death cycles. And think about all the conditioning that we go through as people from the moment that we're born until wherever you are on your path in this moment. And the deconditioning that it takes to be you. And honoring just that self part of you. Very, very, very important moving into this transit, because Aquarius is the sign that relates very much to our individuation. And it is a form of rebellion to me, in my perspective, in the world that we live in right now, to be yourself and to commit to that deconditioning and shedding of the skins and whatever has to happen for that to be your existence. And this is going to be, coming on Thursday, a preview of this energy with Pluto and Aquarius. This is adding to the intensity of the energy that we already kind of are in and are moving into this week. Pluto moves very slowly. It's the slowest moving planet. So it's, like I said, it's kind of like a dipping of the toe in. And Pluto's going to kind of straddle and dance back and forth between the beginning of Aquarius and the end of Capricorn for over a year. So wherever Aquarius is in your chart, wherever Aries is in your chart, very important spaces to pay attention to. You may have already experienced some synchronicities or energies building with this coming, because Pluto's just been squatting at the end of Capricorn for a while now. And just to kind of tie in current events, Pluto shifted into Capricorn in 2008, and remember what was happening during that time. Remember the banking collapses in the finance industry and all of the protests that were happening. And now we're closing out this time of Pluto and Capricorn with very similar energy. Think about everything that just happened last week. The synchronicity is amazing. Can't make this stuff up. It's wild. So we have that on Thursday. And then Mars will finally shift out of Gemini, where it's been since August of last year, on Saturday around 7:45 a.m. So moving from Gemini into Cancer. Cancer is not Mars's favorite place to be, but that will also be a big shift. It's been a very long time. So also pay attention to that part of your chart if you know your chart as well, your Gemini and Cancer houses. And you'll probably notice some shifts that have been starting to build around Mars finally moving on over the last couple of weeks, or maybe even on the day that Mars finally leaves the sign of Gemini, which I am super ready for. I'm just hoping that it gives some oomph and energy to us nurturing ourselves and each other, rather than verbal wars and information wars and that kind of thing. So incredible, incredible week that we have coming up. I am so excited to experience this and be here at this time. It's not been an easy journey. I know it hasn't been for anybody, especially the last couple of years, but it's going to be so significant to witness all of this kind of happening, especially in the same week. I mean, wow. And then just visually, if you've been looking up in the night sky, Jupiter is still visible for now. As the sun moves through Aries, more and more Jupiter will become invisible and then shift to the morning sky. So after sunset, Jupiter and Venus are still close together. Jupiter's getting dimmer and dimmer. Venus is getting brighter and brighter and dazzling the evening sky. It's just such a sight. I love it when Venus is visible after sunset. It's just so beautiful. I love the energy of it too. So you have those two, and then Mars is getting dimmer and dimmer now that the retrograde is over, still visible after sunset in the evening and the night sky. And we'll have the crescent moon, the new moon, come again to Jupiter, and then between Jupiter and Venus, and then with Venus. So that'll be beautiful as the crescent moon starts to wax. So look out for that in the evening sky after sunset starting tomorrow. It'll probably be a very thin sliver tomorrow, but as the week goes on, we'll have that visual as well. Mercury is currently invisible, shifting from the morning to the evening ahead of the next retrograde that's coming next month. Saturn is now visible in the morning sky. So just to note a little bit on where we can see the planets right now as all this is happening. I always feel like that visual connection is something that's super important, and an important part of the connection that we have with them. So that is our astro weather forecast. So exciting. So let's move into our Chiron content. Just to note too, I always say I love hearing from you all. If you have any shifts that you've already noticed start happening, or anything that's been real synchronicity with everything that comes up over the next week, I'd love to hear from you. I love hearing stories about how astrology is playing out in everyone's lives, collectively and individually. That's part of the whole reason why I started this project, is to document and talk about the lived experience. If you know where it's happening in your chart, then that's an extra set of themes that you kind of should have your finger on the pulse of. For me, Aries is my 12th. So that's this time of the year is always really interesting for me. There's always some kind of spiritual element that comes in, like some kind of layer or new part of my reawakening experience. So that's always fun for me. March is always kind of just I feel like it's just a very chaotic energy, which is unsettling to me a little bit with all of my Libra placements. I have nothing in Aries, and it's just always some surprise or deepening or leveling up experience to an extent. Me kind of realizing my own life force in a new and different way. Like today, I just have boundless energy, even though I barely slept last night. It's a gift. It's such a gift. And like I said, Chiron's in Aries now and has been since, I think, 2018, around the same time that Uranus shifted. I don't know if it was 2017 or 2018, but it's been in Aries for a while. It's like right in the middle of Aries right now. So those themes around our identity are so prevalent and have been ever since Chiron shifted in Aries as well. And the healing experience being always an underlying theme and part of it. So I'd love to hear from you if you are experiencing these transits in synchronistic ways, or however you want to share. If you want to share, I'd love that. So let's move on to our Chiron content for today, which, like I said, is going to be Chiron in the 7th house. And the 7th house of our chart is the space that relates to our relationships, which is kind of funny and synchronistic for me that this episode is coming up today, as for me, I have all those placements in Libra, and that is the relationship area. And the Aries energy is just the polar opposite, and that's all about independence and individual. So interesting dynamic that we have going on the topic that's coming up today too. So like I said, 7th house is partnerships. It's mostly intimate partnerships, or like one-on-one. So like your spouse, your best friend, a business partner, like maybe just one partner. But the really cool thing about the 7th house, besides the themes of relationships, is it's the space that relates to where we come from. The descendant is opposite the ascendant, and that's usually in the 7th house. With the whole sign house system that I use, it's always in the 7th house. So that relates very much to, on a soul level, where we've come from. If you know your chart, sometimes your descendant can be very descriptive of things that you gravitate to naturally, and that can tie into your astrocartography as well, which is really cool. But it's also the place where we draw things in. So this space of the chart is very important to our relationships, but on a deeper level, how and what those relationships show us about ourselves. I call it the house of mirrors frequently when I'm working with people. It's who and what we draw in that holds up the mirror to teach us more about ourselves. So what Barbara says, if you're new, I've been reading from Chiron, the Rainbow Bridge Between the Inner and Outer Planets by Barbara Hand-Clow, to go through the Chiron through the houses and Chiron through the signs content. And this is what Barbara says, and I'll paraphrase like as I usually do, because unless you have the book, you won't know the specifics of her research and the charts that she's talking about. So Barbara says about Chiron in the 7th, Chiron's presence in the 7th house signifies a dynamic of knowing the self through significant relationships on the personal level and strongly affecting other people on a mass scale. This position is the essence of charisma. People with Chiron in the 7th have enormous potential to express the collective unconsciousness of their times, and they have an uncanny ability to mirror the self-image of other people. This is a voracious placement. The presence of Chiron encourages the native to crave the adoration and adulation of others, and more than any other position of Chiron, identification of this energy is a revelation to the native. They need to understand how they are affecting people around themselves, or the intensifying adulation will attach to the personal ego and destroy them. People with Chiron in the 7th, just her references, Janis Joplin, Bob Dylan, Fidel Castro, and Richard Nixon. Very interesting. So she says about those people that they're excellent examples of the power or confusion inherent in this placement. Opposite the house of self, which is the 1st house, it's the place of maximum distortion about who we are, which is the 7th house. Who we are will always be distorted in the perceptions of the self by others until we master polarity. The truth is, each end of the polarity is the same. I am you, and you are me. This is the essential teaching that natives with Chiron in the 7th must master. Mastery on the other side, true comprehension of polarities, only comes with deep wisdom about life. For those with Chiron in the 7th, the hardest issue, relationship, must be learned in the hardest way, with a Chiron crisis about who we are in this place, Earth. The only way learning can occur is in a relationship. Chiron in the 7th is also very involved with mass consciousness, and often some really valuable work is going on in that area. The degree to which the client is conscious of this work is critically important, for their concrete awareness of the effect they have on others will release their inner gift. This is an essential teaching about this position, because the difficulties over interpersonal relationships are usually so potent and distracting that this individual is more blinded to the mere source of knowledge than most of us. They literally cannot see the forest for the trees, so they need powerful and sympathetic help with the difficulties they are having interpersonally. The highest octave of awareness about this position would be a complete mastery of the fact that others react to us as we see ourselves. That what goes on around us is caused by our own thought forms. This is not the book to work out the true rulership of the 7th house, because we do not know enough yet. But we can be open to the idea that the 7th house rules our connection to extraterrestrials as well as others in general. Individuals with Chiron in the 7th house will be our teachers about how to respond to the other, the galactic plane as it relates to Earth. And then she goes into some chart examples in her chart work and her work with her clients. And then just to kind of summarize this, the key to Chiron in the 7th house is to carefully analyze relationships, identify what the inherent teachings are, and then help free the native from the astral grip, while also identifying the palpable gifts to the culture which are occurring. Helping to see the teaching in experience, advising that more experience here than most people is needed. And it's important to become conscious of the effect that they are having on others. Interesting. I find it fascinating what she says about extraterrestrials too. And like I said at the end of the last episode, so we've gone through 1 through 6, houses 1 through 6, and 7th is where we start bringing all of that inner work out into the outside world. And the first place that lands is in our relationship with other people, and how we draw people in, who we draw in, and how that holds up the mirror for ourselves. fascinating. Also really interesting too. I think there's been some UFO stuff in, I don't know. I don't pay too much attention to media anymore. But I do recall there being something about aliens recently, or UFOs or something like that. And then just also to pull on the Aquarian vibe, all that stuff relates to the sign of Aquarius. And with Pluto's shift, it'll be interesting to see how that's all transformed on a collective level and also individually, especially depending on where it's happening in your own chart. Okay, so let's get into the Black Moon Astrology Oracle card for the 7th house. In this deck, the 7th house card is number 31, and the word on the card is partners. And the quote, "Marriage is neither heaven nor hell. It is simply purgatory." And that's a quote by Abraham Lincoln. That's funny. Okay, so the description from the book for this card: bindings, whether emotional and domestic, or lawful and what is right or permissible, are indicated now. The 7th house is the area of the chart that represents the other, since it is opposed to the 1st house of the self. Traditionally, it has been thought to be the house of marriage and marriage partners. And although this may still be the primary meaning, the other can also include friends and family and peer groups. So it can mean significant others such as coworkers. Since it's the traditional house of Libra, that's in our Aries rising natural chart, it governs fairness, balance, and the law. It is also the house of open enemies. When the 7th house card presents itself in a reading, it usually means one of two things: either issues dealing with partners or significant others, or court cases and legal issues. The card itself is neutral, much like the actual 7th house, which strives for balance. So the surrounding cards will indicate the basic meaning, whether positive or negative or something in between. I'm going to skip over this part. That's like a description of using it as an oracle deck. I'm going to skip over that too. Doesn't really apply here. Well, this is very much about relationships to other cards in the deck. How fitting. Okay, we'll just skip over all of that. On a mundane level, the 7th house card can mean an engagement, a marriage, or a relationship moving to the next level, as in a partnership becoming more settled and gaining maturity. It can also imply getting ready for a more serious relationship. In the case of dysfunctional or unhealthy relationships, you can look to surrounding cards to see how they will fare in the near future. 7th house card in brief: others, becoming more attractive to prospective mates, preening, flirting, committing to the love of your life, taking relationships to the next level, romantic and domestic partnerships, tying the knot, marriage, spouses, soulmates, duets, partnering, creating alliances, engagements, contractual relationships, long-term alliances, signing contracts, law, legalities, attorneys, legal help, court cases, justice, a fair outcome, negotiations, agreements, co-workers, open enemies, becoming whole through others, codependence, cooperation, the reason behind a partnership, societal expectations, judging, weighing, and balancing. The corresponding tarot card is the Justice card, Justice key, actually. And key ideas for this space: marriage, partners, true love, the other person, rivals, open enemies, courts, lawsuits. So, that's the 7th house. If you have placements in the 7th house, then that certainly flavors the experience for you. I have 3, as I've said, Mercury, Mars, and Uranus, and my 7th house is the sign of Scorpio. So how that's materialized for me throughout my life so far, 1, I need intellectual depth in all of my partnerships. I can tend to meet people in very surprising ways that have a big impact on my life. I think the biggest experience that can speak to this so far is how I met my husband. And that was a shock and a surprise. And at the very moment that I met him, I knew that I was going to marry him. But I was engaged to somebody else at the time. I've already talked about this in my Saturn return episode. But it's usually like lightning. The experiences are like, they make my hair stand on end. They give me chills. And it's like an intuitive knowing about the other person on a level that I can't sometimes put my finger on. So this happened with him. And that was interesting. That was the first time that it had ever happened to me like that before, and how it's materialized. And it's an interesting space. It definitely speaks to how I draw people into my life that teach me how to transform and to get out of my comfort zone and to honor myself at my deepest level. So that is my 7th house. And I've touched on this in other episodes. If you want to go deeper into the Pluto content, I can redirect you to the Mighty Squares episode that I did about the Neptune and Pluto squares. I went in depth into both planets in that episode for more information about themes relating to Pluto and the shifts that are coming this week with the toe dip into Aquarius. Or should I say tail dip? Pluto the dog, the character. Haha. Okay. So that is the Astro Weather forecast for this week. That is Chiron in the 7th house. If you have Chiron in the 7th house and you can speak to what I discussed or what I read from Barbara's book, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. ursaalchemy@gmail.com. And if I can share anything that you want to share with me on the next show, let me know. I did promise last episode that I would look into my Saturn transits when last time Saturn was in Pisces. I have not yet done that. I will do that for the next show. Some other things came up in the last couple of weeks that needed my attention. So more stories on that time period to come. I think that it's going to be pretty fun, especially looking at the music and things that I was into at that point in time in the early 90s. It was definitely my transition from grade school to high school. So that's going to be an interesting thing to look at as well. And it's just all very interesting. It's just a very interesting week. I'm very curious about what this energy is going to bring. And if anything looks really different on the other side of it, even starting next week. I am teaching a lunar alchemy class on Wednesday night from 7 to 8:30 Eastern Daylight Time. If you want to join me for that, that is going to be instruction on the phases of the moon, specifically your natal phase and what that means, and how to work with the phases as we experience them collectively as well throughout every lunar cycle. I thought it good timing to start on Wednesday as we're still under the energy of the Aries new moon and the first new moon of the astrological year. You can register for that on our classes page or right on our homepage. There's a link, cgoddesshealingarts.com, cgoddesshealingarts.com/classes. And that's going to be really fun. And I'll share some personal stories and experiences of new moon intentions that I set that materialized exactly pretty much to the day of the full moon 6 months later. Really, really fun to work with lunar cycles in that way. I've experienced so much incredible synchronicity and transformation in that, and really focusing on the long game rather than the monthly, but the 6 monthly. So that's on Wednesday night. And then on Thursday, we are hosting our first drum circle community event at HG Workshops in Northfield. So we'll be there on Thursday at 7, I believe, as well. And that is in Northfield. So if you're local and want to join us for that, it's free. Donations appreciated, but that's a free community event. We're still looking at indoor spaces until we start our outdoor drum circle season in May. So we're hoping to do another one there next month. So stay tuned for that. And then on Friday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., I have another astrology readings pop-up event at Island Therapy in Summers Point. Instructions for that are also on our website on the classes page. You can either call Island Therapy or email Caitlin over there to register for that. And those are half-hour blocks, so 20-minute readings, and those are $30. So those are usually fun, especially if you just want to get your feet wet with astrology. If you've never had your chart read before, it's a really nice preview of what the experience is like. And then if you do know your chart, we could touch on the transits and see what's happening, particularly with everything that's happening this week. So that's good timing for that. So I wish everybody the best. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're able to support me, the link is there in the show notes. Some financial support would be helpful, as always. And I will be with you again in a couple of weeks on the other side of all this, hopefully with some awesome stories and fun things to share. And as I close every episode, remember to